fellow citizens, our way of life, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
Several shots were fired as President Kennedy's motorcade passed through downtown Dallas.
None of us will ever forget this day. Yet we go forward to defend freedom and all that is good and just in our world.
This is Houston. Say again, please.
Houston, we've had a problem.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
I have a dream. My four little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream today.
Welcome to the Hagmann Daily Show, weekdays 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time. And now your hosts, Joe Hagmann and Jon Robberson.
Hello and welcome to this Wednesday, January 24th, 2018 edition of the Hagmann Daily Show. It is great to be here today. I think I am in my last day of getting over this cold that I've had since Saturday that is just not going away. But today, the first day I woke up and I was not stuffy. Still coughing though, so you might have to bear with me through the show today. Again, we got so much we're going to get into today. There is no shortage of news and current events ongoing related to the Trump administration, the corruption and the FBI, the release the memo, Twitter bot scandal, and the missing text messages. And there is new information also from a number of sources. John, you pointed out to one article on InfoWars that goes back to I think True Pundit, where it talks about possible references to violence against Trump and his family may be included in the missing text messages. Now, this is speculation, of course, because the text messages are missing. We don't know what is in there, but True Pundit is reporting that a website that purports to have contacts within the U.S. government claims that a high-level FBI agent called on the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to launch an investigation into the FBI and Justice Department, specifically concentrating on the threatening messages. And we're going to get into that. There's also a great article on the New York Times by the author Michael Goodwin. Evidence suggests a massive scandal is brewing at the FBI.
New York Post.
Oh, I'm sorry. New York Post. Yeah, what am I saying? New York Times.
What a way to come into the show. What a way to come into the show, huh? Correct my co-host.
Yeah, jump right in. I want to get into this article. And I was kicking myself yesterday because Mr. Goodwin really put together a very comprehensive article laying out the extent of the corruption in the FBI. And this is something that was out there for the taking. Anybody could have written this article, compiled the facts about all the ongoing drama that has come to the forefront with the FBI and its attempted subversion of the Trump administration and exoneration of the Hillary Clinton emails. And he really wraps it up into a really nice piece with a bow on it and lays it all out there for everybody to see. And I'm glad that it is trending. The number one story on New York Post now by far. It is at the top trending, and we see this is probably the most accurate article I've read on this as a summary as to the extent of the FBI scandal. John, you read the article. What do you think?
Well, let's jump right into it. Again, from NewYorkPost.com by Michael Goodwin. Just give our listeners the two opening paragraphs, which are really just two sentences. During the financial crisis, the federal government bailed out banks it declared too big to fail. Fearing their bankruptcy might trigger economic Armageddon, the feds propped them up with taxpayer cash. Something similar is happening now at the FBI, with the Washington wagons circling the agency to protect it from charges of corruption. This time, the appropriate tagline is too big to believe. Joe?
Yeah, and let's just continue from there. It says each day brings credible reports suggesting there is a massive scandal involving the top ranks of the American premier law enforcement agency. The reports, which feature talk among agents of a secret society and suddenly missing text messages, point to the existence of both a cabal dedicated to defeating Donald Trump in 2016 and a plan to let Hillary Clinton skate free in the classified email probe. Does anybody remember the what was reported Hillary Clinton said about if Donald Trump would win, we're all going to hang.
We're
sort of
all
like
going to
what
hang.
George
Yep.
Bush said at one point when he said if the American people knew what we have done to them, they would string us up on light posts, something along those lines. But this is why she says this, because there is and was a plot in the FBI, in the DOJ, at the very top level in the Obama administration, one, to exonerate Hillary Clinton from the email scandal so that she could become president without any, blemishes on her record. But even more than that, the weaponization of the FISA courts and the intelligence agencies to surveil Donald Trump, Trump Tower, and all Trump associates during the campaign, during the transition, and after he was put into the White House is it's the most massive scandal in American history. And this article from the New York Times goes on to say more support for this view involves the FBI's use of the Russian dossier on Trump. It was paid for by the Clinton campaign and the DNC, as well as the FBI. But it's almost certain that the FBI used this dossier to get FISA court warrants to spy on Trump associates, meaning it used the opposition research of the party in power to convince a court to let it spy on a candidate of another party, likely without telling the court of the dossier's political link, misrepresenting it and presenting it as some sort of real intelligence report from one of the agencies. So think about this. You have the weaponization of the whole surveillance apparatus of the United States government, and it is focused on a presidential candidate who is running against the establishment candidate, Hillary Clinton, who was just basically let off the hook for her mishandling of classified information, a felony which she should have been imprisoned for. Do you know that I believe that they were listening to Trump on his phone calls during the campaign? They had his strategy. They knew what he was going to be talking about, and they monitored all of this. And he still beat them. He beat the media. He beat the Clinton and Obama cabal. He beat the DOJ, the FBI.
He beat Silicon Valley. He beat Hollywood.
Hollywood, absolutely. The social media. He beat all the foreign and New World Order opposition. And he is
the
in
banks,
power
Wall
now.
Street, Madison Avenue, the list goes on and on and on. He beat Vegas odds, for crying out loud. I mean, he beat Las Vegas. And to riff off my very poor Las Vegas analogy, the DNC, the whole hashtag Obamagate, which is one of the big trending hashtags on Twitter as we speak, completely overshadowed, mind you, by Release the Memo. And to any of our listeners who have not tweeted that hashtag at least once, please do so. Release the Memo. As of right now, 3,700 retweets in the last hour. Joe, I think you said
it's not in the top 10 though, John.
Oh, no. And that'll take us to the Feinstein Schiff letter here in a moment. But the Vegas analogy. So the DNC, Barack Obama, Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner, Hillary Clinton, the entire ilk, Podesta and his creepy fat brother, they all put it all on black. And Joe, when the wheel finished spinning, it came up red. And that's what we're dealing with today. And I want to remind our listeners, if we take a quick glance back at Watergate, Joe, you weren't around yet, and I was only about 1.5 years, 2 years old when Watergate happened. However, one of the big, I think we will, I'm actually going to make a political prediction here. When Nixon in his final days was literally making the decision as he kind of prattled around the White House his last few days in office to in fact resign, one of the chief proponents politically that made President Richard Nixon decide that he must resign the presidency, first president in history to ever do so, was that he didn't have the votes to block impeachment proceedings in the House or the Senate. But this was the key, Joe. There were Democrat majorities in both houses of Congress. However, a huge majority of Republicans, Richard Nixon's party, were in fact going to proceed with impeachment, the articles of impeachment as well. Now, I bring this up to ask you this question, Joe. Will we see that type of elder statesmanship? Will we see that type of America first approach from the Democrats in both houses of Congress today?
I don't know, John. I don't know. I want to talk about today. One of my best friends is a black guy named Julius. He has been I grew up with him, known him since I was 2 years old. He's the best man at my wedding. And we had a debate today. He came over. We had a debate today. I want to talk about that later. And then also what you just talked about, John, I want to get into that also. But I want to finish this New York Post piece because there's a few things that we didn't get into that are really important. So just to summarize, we were talking about the FBI's use of the dossier to get FISA warrants, unbeknownst to the court, about the dossier's political foundations and links, even though it was not true. It was just opposition research presented as actual intelligence information. And this article continues that there is a reason to believe Obama turned over classified information about Trump to the Clinton campaign, and as one former federal prosecutor puts it, it doesn't get worse than that. The prosecutor we talked about yesterday, Joseph D. Genova, believes Trump was correct when he claimed Obama aides wiretapped phones at his Trump Tower. These are other elements combined to make a toxic brew that smells to high heaven, and most Americans don't know much about it. Mainstream media coverage has been sparse and dismissive, and there's a blackout from the same Democrats obsessed with Russia, Russia, Russia. And they go on to say, but thankfully, this is not going to be swept under the rug. There is a growing movement, as you referenced, John, released the memo, as well as the number of lawmakers who have come out and said that they want to see this memo released. And an interesting story, John, I don't think we talked about this before the show, on the Daily Caller, the White House said yesterday, we don't have to approve the release of the explosive FISA memo. They can just declassify it and release it. We don't have to approve it. They have the right to declassify the document. That, according to the legal minds consulted by the executive branch at the White House. So all Devin Nunes has to do is release the document. Sarah Huckabee Sanders yesterday said of the memo that the White House supports full transparency, and we believe that the House Intel Committee to make that decision at this point. So I bring this up. The memo, the White House says release it. You don't even need to vote on it. You don't even need our approval because you already have it. Where is the memo? How come it has not been released?
Well,
And
we've got to
will it be
wait.
released?
We've got to wait 19 congressional
No.
days. Now, I
What
tweeted
the White House said subverts all that. It puts all that to bed. There's no need to vote. There's no need for the House approval. They have permission just to release the document.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. I think, Joe, it's safe to say this may be a bold statement, but I'm going to make it anyway. In the 7-year history of the Hagmann Report, have we ever seen not only us as individuals and as a team producing the show, but all of our counterparts across everything from the big YouTubers we work with to people with other significantly solid platforms, whether it's SGT Report, Caravan to Midnight, Josh Tolley, True News, you name it. I mean, everybody is sitting on pins and needles right now, Joe, waiting for this memo. And the whole time you've been doing this, have you ever seen anything like it?
Well, with some of the stuff with 9/11, the people who were really following 9/11 were waiting for certain reports and other information to drop, but not with the not this involving the Obama, the former presidential administration, the new presidential administration. You have the DOJ, the FBI, radicalized for Hillary Clinton's criminal cabal against an outsider named Donald Trump, who wants to put America first and has put America first, which is why the people elected him. And when I said that Trump beat the DOJ, he beat Hollywood, he beat the media, he beat the deep state, he beat Hillary Clinton, he beat Obama. That's what the American people did with Donald Trump. He was just the figurehead that, took the stance that he took for the American people. And there's a great speech I want to play one of these days, John. We should play it tomorrow. I think it's the most fascinating and awesome speech an American president has ever given. And that's a Donald Trump speech. And I'll send that to you. We can listen to it after the show, and we'll play it on tomorrow's show. But
that sounds like a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible. Brings tears to your eyes. But, okay, so what is this scandal at the FBI and with the Obama administration? Where does this leave the Trump administration, and what do we expect going forward? there is still CNN is desperately grasping to the hopes that Robert Mueller is going to turn something over in this, quote unquote Russia investigation. That, may I remind you, yesterday it broke. Peter Strzok in his text message said he didn't even believe anything was there. He didn't even want to be part of this investigation because there was nothing there. Drudges reporting collision course. Congress tightening noose on investigation. Mueller leaks obstruction witnesses. This is from NBC News. Flynn kept FBI interview concealed from White House and Trump. It has come out that Trump, who fired Michael Flynn, or Flynn, who was fired by Donald Trump, had kept secrets and lied to the president and the White House, which that information is coming out now. But there's a lot going on. Can this Russia investigation continue with the information that has come out from the FBI? And when this memo is released, many lawmakers said that this would be the end of the Mueller investigation. So with that said, John, the question you asked of have we ever seen anything like this? No, never. And it's fun to watch. It's crazy.
Well, look at the blowback already occurring. I think one of the most prominent moments that I can recall in my almost 2 years, Joe, working with the team, was our half-hour piece with big-time YouTuber Tracy Beans. And God bless Tracy, by the way. She's done a lot for our show, and she's done a lot for informing the awakened American public as a whole. But she actually read verbatim, Joe, this letter that Senator Dianne Feinstein and Adam Schiff, Representative Adam Schiff, sent to, of all people, Jack Dorsey and Mark Zuckerberg. This is from The Hill, Hill.com. Top Dems call on Twitter, Facebook to investigate Russian bot campaign. This would be funny if it wasn't so critical. Top-ranking Democrats in the House and the Senate are calling on Twitter and Facebook to launch investigations of potential Russian-linked accounts, pushing for the release of a controversial congressional memo. Joe, they're actually trying to sell this idea that there's no enormous groundswell from the red-pilled American public demanding to be made aware of what's in these 4 pages because we're all Russian bots. I mean, does this get any kookier?
Yeah, it does, John. And in your Skype, I just dropped the clip of the speech I want to play, and we have to play it today. It's such a good speech, but we'll get to that later. Yes, what were we just talking about? What did you just say to me?
Oh, we're talking about the Feinstein,
yes, the Russian
Adam
bots.
Schiff letter, and they did real quick. They sent a letter. People can go on my Twitter feed if they want to actually read the letter verbatim. I tweeted it this morning. It's also read verbatim by Tracy Beans on the Hagmann Report, bottom of hour 1 last night, HagmannReport.com. But at the end of the day, you have a I don't even know what you call her, an antique senator that's been chewing her cud for a good 2 decades now up there on Capitol Hill. She's not only calling for Mr. and Mrs. America to turn them in, give them up. Remember that infamous statement. But she and her little lapdog Representative Schiff are now calling on the tech tyrants to use their algorithms, their platforms to push back against these Russian bots, Joe. And I'm telling you, the DNC, it's like they drank too much Russian vodka. I mean, they've gone nuts.
They've
with
gone
Russia.
retard. Never go full retard.
They've gone full retard. And you know who's remained, interestingly, silent on this the last couple of days is Vladimir Putin. I wonder if he'll have something to say in the next news cycle or two.
You know, there's a saying, John, you play stupid games and you win stupid prizes. And that's what the media is doing right now. They're in their self-destruct mode. And, you know, Russia is the biggest boogeyman in American political history. For some country that literally had nothing to do with the presidential election, had no influence, there was no hacking, I don't believe Russian interference or influence changed one person's vote. And that's probably 100% a fact, even though you can never prove it. It's so absurd. But what's even crazier is the media continues to double down. They have gone so crazy. They have got to the point where there have been, you had the fake news awards showing examples of people and reporters being fired and creating fake news on purpose. just to be shown over and over and over and over again how wrong they were. The majority of the American people believe the media is a circus. And for these people in their last gasp, desperate attempt to try to talk down the memo, and I guarantee when the memo comes out, it's going to be Russian propaganda. It's going to be, they're going to continue to do this until the social media sites actually shut down accounts. We got a letter from Twitter saying that we were involved or we were scammed as we either liked or retweeted information from Russian bots, which RT is a actual media organization. It is not Russian propaganda. And just because you want to label it such, doesn't make it so. And I link to the RT here and there. It's not something I do regularly, but if they have a good story, I'll link to it. But to send a letter out saying that, we're part of some Russian propaganda, it's crazy. And now the release the memo hashtag that has been trending is being said to have the influence of Russian bots. Why are the Russian bots so interested in showing the corruption of the FBI and Hillary Clinton?
All the Russian bots are interested in is sticking up these pictures of these ridiculously hot women that don't exist. Well, I guess they exist somewhere. They're all hanging out in Ukraine or somewhere. And if you're enough of an idiot to follow them on Twitter, they start blowing up your direct messages. Those are Russian bots. Well, I don't know anything about any other Russian bots.
The
but go ahead,
you sent
Joe.
me, John, from the Daily Beast sums it up nicely in saying, but a knowledgeable source says Twitter's internal analysis has thus far found that authentic American accounts and not Russian imposters or automated bots are driving the release the memo hashtag. There are no preliminary indications that Twitter activity either driving the hashtag or engaging with it is either predominantly Russia. In short, according to the source who would not speak to the Daily Beast for attribution, the retweets are coming from inside the country, and it is apparent and obvious to anybody paying attention that this is an organic push for transparency and truthful information to be released, and it has nothing to do with Russian bots at all, or Twitter for that matter.
You can even see it anecdotally. All you've got to do is go on Twitter and poke around a little bit, and you got Grandma Sanders out in somewhere in Kentucky with 29 followers, and she's retweeting "I am not a bot." It's pretty obvious that this is a groundswell of conservative, libertarian, constitutionalist, remnant Christian Americans who really just want the truth, which interestingly is one of the primary driving components of our faith as well. Joe, I want to backtrack just quickly to something that you and I both remarked on, because this is super important. Again, a tip of the hat to truepundit.com. And before I forget, a tip of the hat to Robin and her whole crew over at Mad Broadcasting. They sent me that Daily Beast piece while we were on air last night. But this is from truepundit.com. And I think it's important that we don't that we hit this and not gloss it over. FBI Strzok, I guess it is, allegedly dismissed Mueller probe, quote, "no big there." So, Joe, the bottom line is, if the Democrats, if their mouthpieces at CNN are, hanging their last, as you said, dying gasp on Mueller, coming up with the goods, even according to an individual who may be headed straight to jail in the form of FBI agent Peter Strzok, he himself texted his mistress, his honey bunny, that there's nothing there. This is, again, from truepundit.com. New text messages allegedly reveal that controversial FBI official Peter Strzok was hesitant about joining special counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation team because his, quote, gut sense, end quote, there would be, quote, no big there. Yeah. And this goes on to chronicle much of what we already know about the tempestuous love affair of Strzok and Page, who just couldn't get enough of each other. 50,000 texts in about 7 months? That is some serious, boy, love is in the air.
Yeah, the amount of text messages has certainly surprised a lot of people. And, I've heard anywhere from 100 messages a day to 64 to 30. But it's a whole bunch. And they even referenced other communications devices and other phones that they used to talk about this stuff as to not be able to be traced. That is in some of the text messages that were released. And I'd like to, we were looking at the FBI, and isn't it convenient? Hillary Clinton's 33,000 emails go missing. Remember Lois Lerner and her communications and the IRS? They went missing for 2 years until they were found. Now, the biggest political scandal in American history, showing the FBI is complicit in sedition and trying to bring down an American elected president, go missing. What a coincidence. How lucky and fortunate for them. And the texts that go missing happen in a time period from right after Trump was elected until 2 days after Robert Mueller was appointed special counsel of Russia, when all the information in January came out about the wiretaps, when in March the dossier broke, when James Comey was fired, when all this stuff, the Russia investigation was launched. All those, in that time period, those text messages are missing. How convenient. And this was the same people who plotted and put together this conspiracy of the Robert Mueller investigation, of the Russia stuff, and put all this into motion. And those texts are conveniently missing.
I'm putting together the whistleblower dream team. I'm calling out to Daniel Ellsberg. I'm calling out to Edward Snowden. I'm calling out to Julian Assange. And I'm calling out to the spirit of Seth Rich. We need to find these missing text messages, Joe.
Yeah,
and
we do.
Somebody somewhere's got them. And I want to reassure all of our listeners that Attorney General Jeff Sessions came out of his hidey hole yesterday, and he assured all of us that he will leave no stone unturned. Now, last I heard, he was somewhere down near Hershey, Pennsylvania, overturning every stone in town.
Well, John, I want to kind of do something different here. I sent you that video in Skype. So often when we cover President Trump and what's going on, it seems like we're always defending him from the lying fake news media and from these, conspiracies and these plots against him to diminish him, to ridicule and mock him. And we don't ever really listen to what the president says and why he was elected in the first place. And I'm going to play this video now, John, and this is to remind everybody as to what we are fighting for and who we are fighting for. And I think this will serve as a good reminder as to why it is we are doing what we are doing. John, I know you have the clip there. Are you ready to play it with me here? Because you got to hear this when we play this video.
Sorry, a little slow on the uptake there. Is QAnon President Trump? That's the title.
Yeah, that's the title of it, and it has nothing to do with that. This is from the Pete Santilli Show YouTube channel on January 7th, 2018. And I want to play this, and this is why we elected President Trump, and this is why we are fighting so hard for him and for his agenda. Probably the greatest speech ever. Here we go.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exist for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The establishment has trillions of dollars at stake in this election. For those who control the levers of power in Washington and for the global special interests, they partner with these people that don't have your good in mind. Our campaign represents a true existential threat like they haven't seen before. This is not simply another 4-year election. This is a crossroads in the history of our civilization that will determine whether or not we, the people, reclaim control over our government. The political establishment that is trying to stop us is the same group responsible for our disastrous trade deals, massive illegal immigration, and economic and foreign policies that have bled our country dry. The political establishment has brought about the destruction of our factories and our jobs as they flee to Mexico, China, and other countries all around the world. It's a global power structure that is responsible for the economic decisions that have robbed our working class, stripped our country of its wealth, and put that money into the pockets of a handful of large corporations and political entities. This is a struggle for the survival of our nation. And this will be our last chance to save it. This election will determine whether we're a free nation or whether we have only the illusion of democracy, but are in fact controlled by a small handful of global special interests rigging the system, and our system is rigged. This is reality. You know it, they know it, I know it, and pretty much the whole world knows it. The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty in order to enrich these global financial powers, her special interest friends, and her donors. Honestly, she should be locked up. The most powerful weapon deployed by the Clintons is the corporate media, the press. Let's be clear on one thing. The corporate media in our country is no longer involved in journalism. They're a political special interest, no different than any lobbyist or other financial entity with a total political agenda, and the agenda is not for you, it's for themselves. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe. They will lie, and then again, they will do worse than that. They will do whatever's necessary. The Clintons are criminals, remember that. This is well documented. And the establishment that protects them has engaged in a massive cover-up of widespread criminal activity at the State Department and the Clinton Foundation in order to keep the Clintons in power. They knew they would throw every lie they could at me and my family and my loved ones. They knew they would stop at nothing to try to stop me. Nevertheless, I take all of these slings and arrows gladly for you. I take them for our movement so that we can have our country back. I knew this day would arrive. It's only a question of when. And I knew the American people would rise above it and vote for the future they deserve. The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. Our great civilization has come upon a moment of reckoning. I didn't need to do this, folks, believe me. I built a great company, and I had a wonderful life. I could have enjoyed the fruits and benefits of years of successful business deals and businesses for myself and my family, instead of going through this absolute horror show of lies, deceptions, malicious attacks. Who would have thought? I'm doing it because this country has given me so much, and I feel so strongly that it's my turn to give back to the country that I love. I'm doing this for the people and for the movement, and we will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
All right, so there you have it. How can
Wow.
you not?
How can you
not stand up for that? And
How
and
can
it's a
you
good
not
reminder.
love the man?
Right.
You know?
I mean, and we need that kind of reminder as to understand what it is we are fighting for, why we are so passionate about the things that we talk about, and why it's so important to expose that corruption that is has been plaguing our country for so long, and now is there's never a better time than now, and everything's basically on the table. So when we do this day in and day out, that's this is why we talk about what we talk about, and it's so important to remember what we're fighting for, because we can get lost in the details just about every day and be, overcome with anger at all the craziness we see going on. But you have to remain positive. You have to remain hopeful and continue to move forward. And it's always good to have those reminders.
Well, it is interesting certain days in the studio when you bring together the 6 or so of us that really are the engine that drive the show, because we go through all of those emotions. We go through frustration, a lot of gallows humor, a lot of irony. I try to find news items that Joe hasn't found every day. I'm rarely successful. And then Doug will come into the studio and he'll hit us both across the nose with a newspaper. So it really is something to deal with every day. But Joe, I want to remind our listeners of something that I heard some great commentary on this morning. And this is a tip of the hat to Sean from SGT Report, sgtreport.com, libertymill.com. He was interviewing a writer whose name escapes me at the moment, and I apologize for that. But the point they were making together is that we're already, to a degree, marked for death. Now, the question is, is it some sort of black helicopters closing down the highways type death that many of us envisioned back in 2010, 11? Or is it more of a slow kill death with GMO foods, fluoridated water, whatever the heck it is they're spraying above our heads 200 plus days a year? Not to mention all of the new information coming out, some of it coming out of Davos, a lot of people blowing the whistle on the coming 5G technology, and the fact that the number one cause of death by cancer among youth 15 to 19 are brain tumors. And in fact, people are beginning to identify that our cell phones are literally microwaving our brains. So the time to stand up is now, because you're already marked, and you may not even want to admit this. You may not want to be part of this fight. You may want to turn this show off right now, but you may as well stand and put on your big boy and big girl britches, because this is happening now. And we've all been marked. Joe, with the advent of the Social Security card,
Scripture
go
says
ahead.
that, John. And one last thing about support. We've been getting a lot of emails and feedback, and we really do appreciate that. A lot of people saying that they enjoy, all the shows we put out. And there is a PayPal link in the Blog Talk description. If you can support us monetarily, we really do appreciate that. And here in a minute, I'm going to also talk to you about a company who we have done business with in the past, who has a great product, the Minuteman Rocket Stove. And we're going to have him on for a few minutes on Friday to talk about some of the new things he has going on. But if you haven't seen the Minuteman Rocket Stove, you have to check this thing out. It is the perfect go-to stove to it's basically a stove built into an ammo can. It's portable, it's convenient, and it's very easy to use. It has burners on it. It's an awesome invention, and that's minutemanstove.com, and I'll bring that email up. But I just wanted to say about the support, we appreciate everybody's support. We appreciate everybody's feedback. And if you can support our show monetarily, we would really appreciate that as well. And John, there is no better time than now to stand up and fight. There is no time in history, really, where we've seen the amount of threats that are facing not only Christians, but humanity in general. And we see that it is something that is changing at a rapid pace. Not only the things that we can control and see, the man-made things, but the natural disasters. And we're going to talk about some earthquake activity along the Ring of Fire in the Pacific that has many people concerned, and earthquake predictions are going crazy right now. And this is a time to be grounded in your faith, to have a good head on your shoulders, and to know what direction you're moving in, because things can change so fast.
Absolutely. It's interesting. I've had the privilege, the honor, the blessing, I know you have as well, Joe, of meeting hundreds and hundreds of Hagmann Report listeners over the past several years. And of course, you've got to make the effort, generally speaking, to get on a plane or hop in the car and take a long drive. I know your dad and yourself and I did, 500 plus miles back from Chicago last summer. And even going back to Whitestone in 2014, I sold silver at a huge loss to be at that conference, and look where it got us all today. My point is, in meeting a lot of these listeners, you hear very different stories, but you hear certain similarities too, Joe. And many, many people, particularly the men I've talked with, they tend to become preparedness minded externally first. They look at the terrestrial world around them, whether it's with all the quantitative easing 2, 3, 4 years ago, the Obama administrations, et cetera, and they start to maybe buy precious metal, maybe buy some guns, maybe read the Bible a little bit more here and there, buy some storable food, et cetera, et cetera. And then there comes that amazing shift, and I know it happened in me in 2013 after several years of being a quote-unquote prepper already. And that shift indicates in our spirit that this fight is on a spiritual level first and foremost. And I just wanted to echo what you just said, Joe, that you've got to be grounded in your faith. I honestly, just to be completely transparent with people, I don't know how we pull it off every day. I don't know how people like you and me and your dad and Eric, I don't know how we keep our sanity. Frankly, it's got to be the Lord interceding on our behalf, because I think I would have popped a screw a long time ago.
Yeah, it is something else to watch, and it's a great time to be alive, and it's definitely never a dull moment. John, can you take it a second? I gotta blow my nose.
And that's it right there on the Hagmann Daily Show. That's the difference. That's what you get when we untuck our shirts and we leave the jacket and ties hanging in the special jacket tie room in the studio.
No, as I said at the beginning of the show, I've been battling a cold, and today's the first day I woke up unstuffed. But since I've started the show, I don't know, I've been getting a little stuffy. I don't know if it's the room I'm in. I don't know if it was that Trump piece, that can get you all emotional. I don't know, but the nose is plugged. I want to kind of switch gears here and talk about something I just saw on Drudge, and this is kind of just out of left field, John. We didn't plan on talking about this. Leading member of far-right AFD in Brandenburg converts to Islam. Now, this is crazy. The Alternative for Germany is known for its mantra that Islam doesn't belong in Germany. Now, a senior member of the party has caused a mini sensation by converting to Islam. They're saying this guy was a German anti-Islamic national who, out of the blue, converted to Islam. And he has been quoted by saying things...
You smell something, Joe?
I don't know what this is. Maybe he was brainwashed.
Maybe it's the cat box. Go ahead.
He has said many things publicly against Islam, saying Germany is mutating into a different country. Islam does not belong here. It does not belong in Germany. It's their ideology is a serious threat to societal peace and cultural unity. But now he's converted to Islam for personal reasons. It doesn't make any sense. None whatsoever. I don't get it. There's something else going on here.
I don't either, and it makes me want to segue, before we get into the Earth events, it makes me want to segue to this story that was up on Drudge earlier today, and I'm having a heck of a time finding it right now, about that Pakistani guy, and what on earth was he thinking?
Yeah, I looked for that after we talked, and I didn't see it. The only thing I saw was a child trafficker on trial is wanting a change of venue because he's saying he can't get a fair trial amidst the child sex trafficking crackdown and amidst the attention that the public is giving it. He doesn't believe he can get a fair trial, so he wants to see a change of venue or wants some kind of special consideration for it. I don't know. And the Pope is also in the news. This is something I couldn't pull up earlier because the Reuters site was, they had this article up and then I went back to it and it said it was under construction or whatever. But the Pope says something I agree with. And John, I think you'll agree with too, just not in the same context. I don't think we agree. Pope condemns evil of fake news and its use for political gain. Pope Francis on Wednesday condemned the evil of fake news, saying journalists and social media users should shun and unmask manipulative snake tactics that foment division to serve political and economic interests. Fake news is a sign of intolerant and hypersensitive attitudes and leads only to the spread of arrogance and hatred. That is the end result of untruth, Francis said in the first document by a pope on the subject. Now, what we just read, what we just went over, I agree with 100%. Would you agree with that, John?
Yes.
Okay. Well, they go on in the article to quote, it was issued after months of debate on how much fake news may have influenced the 2016 presidential election. The document called The Truth Will Set You Free, Fake News and Journalism for Peace was issued in advance of the Catholic Church's World Day of Social Media or Social Communications on May 13th. Spreading fake news can serve to advance specific goals, influence political decisions, and serve economic interests, the Pope writes, condemning the manipulative use of social networks and other forms of communication. This false but believable news, insomuch as it grasps people's attention by appealing to stereotypes and common social prejudice and exploiting instantaneous emotions like anxiety, contempt, anger, and frustration, he said. Satan's serpent. And I agree with that. Now, we look at the way they're coming from it, the angle they're coming from it, I believe, and as we see, is from, basically against Trump and for the mainstream media, because that's how the Pope has aligned himself in this battle and interjecting himself into the American politics. But I think it is beyond, I know for a fact, beyond any, all proof shows it is the left-wing media. It is the CNNs, the MSNBCs, NBCs, ABCs, CBSs, and the rabid online, BuzzFeeds and Huffington Post. It is these people who are the fake news, and they are Satan's serpent. So in that regard, I agree with the Pope, but he is coming at it from the wrong side.
Well, we've got to be careful there, Joe, because this Pope is duplicitous on just about every level. I'm sorry to step on you, but
no, go for it.
I want to be clear. This is not in any way besmirching our Catholic brethren. I can't stand this Pope, okay? There's nothing. I despise the man, to be perfectly frank, and I disregard him as occupying the same position as Peter, the rock upon which Christ built his church. Give me a break. I don't like the guy.
Defending a pedophile bishop last week, if you saw that, John.
And speaking of defending pedophilia, I'm sorry, Joe, but I did find the article. Because I mentioned it, I want to give our listeners a little bit of meat and potatoes. Now, I'm not familiar with this site, but it's on a number of sites. This is from, I guess it's called thekint.com, QUINT.com, but it's the first one that came up. Child abuse leads to great art. Newsweek Pakistani editor faces fury. Give me just 60 seconds on this. Fasi Ahmad, editor and publisher of Newsweek Pakistan, claimed in a tweet that child sexual abuse sometimes, quote, leads to great art, end quote, on January 22nd. This comes as Pakistan reels under the pain of the gruesome rape and murder of 7-year-old Zanab Amin. Sorry, these names are unfamiliar to me. That ignited nationwide protests. Now, here's some of his tweets, Joe. The sexual abuse of children will always exist. You can never eliminate it. Sometimes it leads to great art. So there's also that. Here's another tweet. Child sexual abuse has always happened, is happening, and will always continue. 2 days of outrage on Twitter and participating in a 10-person vigil may make you feel so noble, but that's all just about you, not those who've been victimized. Here's the last.
John, read that first one again before you move on.
Yeah, it's making me feel a little bit nauseous. The first one says, the sexual abuse of children will always exist. You can never eliminate it. Sometimes it leads to great art. So there's also that.
Okay, is he being sarcastic? Do we know? I mean,
well, he was.
How can you be? Never mind. No, that's a stupid question.
No,
what
it's not a stupid
freaking pervert! This
he
guy
was given the opportunity to walk it back, and he didn't. He actually reiterated, "Yeah, I wasn't." He said, "I was not hacked. That's my Twitter, and I tweeted it."
What are you talking about? Great art.
Well, you could ask Tony Podesta. Look what's hanging in his house. The final tweet from I can't even use the words I want to use about this guy. Okay. This is a direct quote. Uncles, servants, teachers, cousins, random shopkeepers hurt boys and girls. Did you report them? Did you have the balls to step out of your denial? This is the cause du jour. Default mode denial is just around the corner. Zanab, that's the 7-year-old rape victim, is not a watershed moment. Ahmad, so now here's commentary in the article. Ahmad chose not to express angst or condemn the government's delay in arresting the 24-year-old key suspect behind the rape and murder of Zanab, again, the 7-year-old girl, and possibly other girls. Instead, he showed keen interest in the serial killer's sexual orientation by stating, quote, on the bright side, at least he's, parenthetically, the suspect, straight, end quote. Joe, this guy is the news editor for Newsweek Pakistan. I mean, this should
insane.
be front page everywhere. This is insanity. Again, I just read that from thekink.com.
That's crazy.
Interestingly, it was up on Drudge earlier today and no longer is.
Why publish a piece like that? I mean, that only fuels the anger. And I mean, unbelievable, John, and it's unexcusable whether he was being. I don't believe you can be sarcastic when joking about sexual abuse in any way, especially of children.
If you are,
and I believe that he made that remark about the art as kind of a dig at the Pizzagate people. But either way, it's unexcusable, and the guy himself sounds like a pedophile. He sounds like a pedophile. We can't say he probably is, but he definitely has some of the tendencies, and the language he used sounds very defensive over pedophiles and pedophilia in general, saying it will never be stopped. What a douche.
I want to mention one thing, Joe, and then I'm going to hand it over to you because I know you want to do a lightning round on some of these Earth events and the Ring of Fire, etc. So I'll make this my last big bomb for today. Joe, I'm sure you've considered this, but we haven't really discussed it. With the advent and our awareness of this 4-page FISA memo, with our recent awareness of all these missing text messages, which may in fact indicate a secret society within the FBI to derail the Trump campaign, even going as far as meeting in some church in D.C., that's pretty creepy in and of itself.
How about this? What about the possibility that they met at Obama's political mansion where Loretta Lynch was living?
Oh, you mean the Church of Satan?
Jarrett.
Yeah, there you go.
Remember that house in D.C. Obama has? 2 blocks from the White House where Valerie Jarrett's been staying? How about meeting there?
It probably makes the Playboy Mansion look like, a Baptist summer camp. But my question I wanted to pitch at you, Joe, and again, this is going to be my last biggie for today. Have you considered that these could be these missing texts, this enormous political scandal, this 4-page FISA memo, that as we begin to pull the yarn of this sort of moldy sweater that they tried to suffocate Americans under, that it could in fact lead to the ultimate depths of depravity vis-a-vis the reports, the suspicion of people like John Podesta, Tony Podesta, Hillary Clinton, Huma Abedin, Anthony Weiner, the whole story that kind of went nowhere about the New York City Police Department seeing optics that cause grown men to cry and get sick. Joe, this could be the very first tug of the yarn that leads directly to what we call pedogate and satanic ritual abuse of children.
Absolutely, it could be, and we've seen the crackdown. The constant attention that it is receiving. Craig Sawyer and other people doing great work, and it's awesome to see. And John, what we're talking about, this basically the societal battle where you have the people trying to expose pedophilia and corruption, and then those who are basically defending it. And the mainstream media falls into that category. And yesterday we talked about a story about a CNN, a person so angry at CNN that they threatened to go there and shoot up the building. I just want to state this for the record. I believe that you will see, whether it's real or not, there is going to be some kind of act of violence against the media, because what better way to be able to say, I mean, I've already seen, just based on that report on CNN last night, I forgot to talk about this, Don Lemon and others were basically crying about how their lives are in danger because of President Trump's violent rhetoric against the media, when they're the ones who've done it to themselves. They're the ones, he's only using their examples and their mistakes and intentional misreportings and throwing it back in their face as fake news, and they take that as some kind of an assault. So I said that to say, I wouldn't be surprised if you see some kind of either real or orchestrated act of violence against the media for them, in order purposely for them to try to regain some sort of sympathy and attention from the public, especially in the wake of all this political scandal. As a new Breitbart article points out, faith in FBI plummets as 49% of those polled in a Rasmussen poll demand a special prosecutor to investigate the FBI. We're getting into dangerous territory here where a lot can happen. And do you not think these people who run the government, who basically run terrorist ops all the time, are not going to attempt to thwart attention away from their corruption and their misdeeds that are all coming out into the public. People
Absolutely.
better keep a close
Yes.
attention, because something is brewing. You can feel it. And whether it is some kind of false flag or something against the media, something is brewing. And speaking of that, in the final moments of the show, let me see how much time we got left
Let me
here.
punch in with a quick comment, Joe. You summarized this so succinctly last night, right before we went on air. I called across the studio to Joe. Joe, is there anything that could possibly bury the relevance, the demand for this 4-page memo, the release the memo hashtag? And without missing a beat, Joe said, sure, a building blows up and falls to the ground tomorrow and it's back page news.
Yeah, at least for a while. And it is it's a very real possibility, and it is something that we can't, no matter what happens, the American people have to keep the pressure on about this. I mean, we can never, there will never be an opportunity to rid the top levels of our government of such corruption again, as there really has not been an opportunity thus far that we have seen yet. So it is so important that we not, no matter what, let these people skate on some diversion tactic, but expect it, because I bet it's going to happen. And John, you mentioned the earthquakes. This is something that we all have to pay attention to simultaneously, and that is the threat of potential earthquakes as we see this huge uptick in the Ring of Fire, the Pacific Ring of Fire earthquake fault lines. And there have been earthquakes in Alaska, a 6.2 in Japan. There was an 8.0 in Alaska a few days ago. And there's been hundreds and hundreds of aftershocks all up and down the Ring of Fire. And it's leading many people to basically put out earthquake warnings. And then we have this super blue moon to coincide with lunar eclipse for the first time in 150 years. And on Drudge, under that Ring of Fire erupts in activity. Scientists say rush of earthquakes and volcanic eruptions on Ring of Fire not connected, but I doubt that, as we see this activity always coincides with the volcanic activity and the tectonic plate movement. But they say the rash of natural disasters over the past 2 days have one common denominator. They all occurred along the so-called Ring of Fire, a sprawling horseshoe-shaped geological disaster zones. At least 5 different events occurred on the Ring of Fire Monday and Tuesday, including a 7.9 earthquake in Alaska and the eruption of Mount Kashatsu Shirain near a ski resort northwest of Tokyo. And then you have the tsunami warning, a volcanic eruption kills 1, injures 17. Philippine volcano explodes, villagers flee to shelters. And they say that while this series of cataclysmic activity has come in rapid succession, scientists say most of them occurred thousands of miles apart, and there's nothing to suggest they are connected. But if I've learned anything from listening to Stan Deyo and paying attention to earthquakes over the last 10 years, they absolutely are connected.
Well, you better believe they are.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And we should look for more potential events to happen and be prepared for that.
This creates such division among the brethren, and I really don't understand why. It's right in Scripture, and it used to be the opening of True News for many, many years, truenews.com. This is Luke 21. Verse 25, the English Standard Version, quote, "And there will be signs in the sun and moon and stars, and on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves." Again, that's Luke chapter 21, verse 25.
And John, that's very relevant. And this article from the LA Times, when we think of the biblical implication of destructive earthquakes and, Armageddon type scenarios, think about this. Earthquake fault in Beverly Hills, Santa Monica fault zone runs through the heart of Beverly Hills Rodeo Drive shopping district, one of the most famous in LA, known for their high and Gucci, Prada, and other luxury brands. Imagine the destruction, an earthquake of a high magnitude through that fault line, what that would cause.
Not only that, but get this. I tweeted this out the other day. If you look at you can find this on my Twitter feed, but people have to fish back about 2 weeks. If you look at an aerial view of CAA, Creative Artist Agency, which is the biggest A-lister factory probably in the world, where it's built on in Century City, which is the former MGM backlot where part of Wizard of Oz was filmed, but I'm getting in the weeds. If you look at that arrangement, it's 3 separate pyramids with the Eye of Osiris as part of the landscaping. It's obviously completely Luciferian in its architecture, and it is exactly where that fault line runs. And Joe, wouldn't it be appropriate if Rodeo Avenue just split wide open and the Lord God Almighty swallowed all these reprobates? There's a hashtag Me Too for you.
Our outro music's playing. We're out of time. It was a fun and great show. We will be back tomorrow. Also, don't forget to check out our friend Lane Miller, MinutemanStove.com. Use promo code Hagmann. We'll talk about this more tomorrow. Have a great day.
The Hagmann Daily Show is brought to you by the Hagmann Report. Tune in to the Hagmann Report weekdays, 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. For more information, go to HagmannReport.com. That's HagmannReport.com.